Today, we discuss media coverage of both presidential candidates and if it's fair, but more importantly, if it's honest. Then we take a look at the rebel yell and the current state of the paper and whether the paper that has littered the campus will become litter itself. 4 UNLV panelists are with us today to hash it all out. Thank you for joining us. This is The Scramble. Welcome and thank you for joining us. Our guests today are Studio G reporter Karina Perez, Studio G reporter Catherine Ho, Rebel Yell managing editor Blaze Lovell, and Rebel Yell photographer Andrew Rigney. We begin on our first topic. Media coverage of the election has been on our televisions and Facebook feeds since February of last year. With a year and more of time covering the election, the topics themselves have subsided into old news. Fascinated by this, we at The Scramble wanted to take a look today at how media coverage has been on both candidates and their following issues, and if that coverage has been fair. Trump, of course, has had his carousel of issues, but though we all can laugh or cringe, we can't help but ask, are we being fair in giving Hillary's controversies the same approach? We take a look at this by watching a discussion on Fox News' Megyn Kelly and the argument former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich made. Take a look.
Out something to you.
Sure.
The three major networks spent 23 minutes attacking Donald Trump that night and 57 seconds on Hillary Clinton's secret speeches. You don't think this is a scale of bias worthy of Pravda and Izvestia? I mean, you want to know why Donald Trump's had a rough time?
If Trump is a sexual predator, that is...
He's not a sexual predator.
Okay,
you
that's
can't
your
say
opinion.
that.
I'm not taking a position
defend
on
that
it.
statement.
I'm
sick and tired of people like you using language that's inflammatory, that's not true.
Excuse me, Mr. Speaker.
Donald
you have
Trump
no idea whether it's true or not. What we know is that there are...
So let's boil down what we just saw. We just saw Newt Gingrich, former Speaker of the House, saying and talking about what we call this 26-to-1 ratio, saying that 26 of the minutes that go on to most media, most news sites is made out towards Trump, but one of those is made out to Hillary Clinton. Karina, I want to ask you, do you think that this claim is fair? Do you feel like there's some sort of validity to Newt Gingrich's claim?
I think he does have a point. Like, I do see a lot more Trump coverage than Hillary Clinton coverage, but I feel like the reason that is because the media wants to focus on what the viewers want to see. The viewers want to hear about Donald Trump and all the stupid stuff that he's been doing, so they're going to focus more on that. They're not going to focus on Clinton, where people don't really, like, she has her support, she has the people against her, but the stuff that people want to be against, like, they don't really understand it, and they don't know how to argue it. With Trump's things, like, it's easy to argue against somebody that's been accused of sexual assault. Like, they can attack him as much as they want, but it's like, but what are you going to attack Hillary for? Like, she does have her controversies, but like the email thing, half the people don't understand what that means. Like, they don't understand, like...
Well, so then I want to ask you, do you feel like the audience is to blame then for all the Trump coverage? Do you feel like since they want more Trump that the media is just giving them what they want?
More or less, it's like the media is feeling on what the audience is feeling on. So it's like more of a give or take. Like, the media's covering Trump, the audience loves it, so they're going to keep on adding to it.
So then let me ask you, do you think that the news has a responsibility to maybe give them more of a informed version of what the news is, or do you think they should give them, again, what the audience wants?
I mean, as a journalist, I feel like the media should be unbiased, but the truth of the matter is, it's like, it's not going to be. Like, you have certain networks that are more leaning towards certain people, so they're going to skew it differently, and you're going to appeal more to that specific audience. Like,
Sure.
You know, I just want to say something. It's just so easy to talk about Trump because before he even ran for president, he was already a celebrity. And, you know, it's something, it's kind of funny. I just wanted to call it like a Kim Kardashian effect. I mean, especially for the millennials, they ask them what else was going on in the news during her robbery, because her robbery was on all, you know, social media, everything. Do you think the millennials really know? And I think the same thing is going on with Trump. I mean, his stories it's easy to talk about, it's interesting, and it's kind of fun. It's entertainment news to me.
So you think that since some of the things that surround Hillary are much more complex and require a more in-tune understanding of what controversies surround it, aka understanding the differences between the DMC and super PACs, you feel that Trump is a lot more easier to digest and understand?
No, I definitely agree with that, especially like I was mentioning, the millennials, do they know anything about anything you just said, or do they go?
Yeah, I agree
and
with you. Yeah, like I agree with you. Like that's the point I wanted to make. Like people don't understand like the whole emo controversy. People, not that many people know what that means. If you ask them, hey, what do you think about the emo controversy surrounding Hillary? They'll be like, I don't know. Like, and I've asked people, what do you think of super PACs? Like, they don't understand what that means. Like, it's
Exactly.
Like,
So have you seen a concerted effort for people trying to explain that, or whose responsibility is it then to understand more complex things on the Hillary Clinton side?
That's a tough one, though. I feel like, I mean, like some people just don't find interest in it. Like, they don't get it. They don't want to learn more about politics. They just want to. They want to add on, like when you go on social media, you go on Twitter, you see people just talking about Trump, because it's like easy
It's
stuff to
fun.
talk about. It's yeah, it's fun. It's fun to
something you
bash
can
on Trump.
discuss about with your friends or
Exactly.
with someone you meet on the train or the bus. But if
Exactly.
you go up to someone that a stranger, it's like, so what do you think about, Hillary and WikiLeaks? They might not even know anything about that.
Well,
you
then,
know?
Blaze, let me ask you, as a managing editor for the Rebel Yell, we have seen stories for both sides, and actually there was a concerted effort that I saw in the paper to make sure that both sides were covered. Nonetheless, how do you feel that the coverage of the Rebel Yell has been doing when it comes to this election? Do you feel like there's been fair-sided to each candidate?
I feel like the Rebel Yell is privy to the media business model that exists in all organizations, and that we are so obsessed, and our culture is so obsessed with clicks, likes, shares on social media, because that's what we sell to advertisers. Look at our pickup rate.
Right.
That's how we can price our advertising. So I like to call Trump a clickable candidate.
Sure.
He generates news, and indeed, I took a look at several of our articles. He appears more times than Clinton. In the first debate article I wrote, Trump's name appeared 11 times, Clinton's name appeared 8. In a follow-up story to that, I wrote a feature on what students should expect from the final debate, which is nothing, because honestly, both candidates wouldn't change their rhetoric style even if someone put a gun at their head. Trump's name was mentioned 13 times, Clinton's was only named 7. In a highlight of the final debate, I felt that the article was very one-sided towards Clinton's side, and almost attacking Trump. Every point was pretty much made against him.
Well then, so let me ask you as a journalist, and this is a loaded question in a sense. If I were to ask you to do a story about one of the controversies of Hillary and Trump, which one do you think it would be a shorter story? Which one do you think would have much more elongated explanations of the curves of the controversy, or which one would be, do you think, would be easier to grab eyes?
We would definitely have to go more into depth with Secretary Clinton's scandals, because it's not something that is necessarily accessible to the majority of people. I mean, we're all journalists here. It's like we live in that world, we're privy to the information, and we're surrounded by it every day. But people outside, they don't necessarily know that. So it makes it hard for us as journalists to try to convey that message to them, whereas Trump is like media candy. It's simple sugar, he's sweet, it's digestible.
Right.
It's easy for people to grasp, but it might not be good for their health. It's not necessarily what they need.
Sure, but Newt Gingrich's claim, in a sense, was that in this election, we are getting more involved with Trump. And because of that, Hillary Clinton's controversies pale in comparison because they're easier to explain, not pale in comparison because they're worse. That argument can be made. So do you feel like, as a journalist, it's much more difficult to explain certain controversies by Hillary Clinton, and as so, might show that her controversies are a little bit more in-depth and require that explanation because of the severity of them? Do you feel like that has some sort of weight to it?
Yeah, I would agree with you. Clinton's controversies are harder to explain. It's what we should be taking the time to explaining, and the majority of the media hasn't. If you look at front pages of the New York Times, USA Today, almost all of them have had Trump on the cover. Meanwhile, there's other things going on in Mosul, conflicts in Syria. Clinton is still around, but she's remained pretty much under the radar.
Sure.
Yeah, and we live in a
Go
world
ahead,
where
Karina.
people want stuff quick. They don't want to spend an hour reading an article about like some controversy going on. They want to know what's going on. That's it. 2 sentences. That's it. That's
Right.
all they want.
I agree. I feel like there's like a line between ethical journalism and reporting the news, but then on the other side, well, and unbiased, and then on the other side, reporting whatever sells. And I don't know, like, I don't know.
So which is easier to sell as a journalist, do you feel, Trump or Hillary? when it comes to selling a story about a controversy.
What also makes it easier with covering Trump is that there's always something new with Trump. Like with Hillary, she sticks to the same thing. The only controversies that like seem to be taking up the most airtime would be like the email scandal, like stuff like that. But with Trump, it's like a new thing every other week. So it's much easier.
But I wonder,
Sure.
are people digging for that then? They're digging deeper and deeper into Trump stories because of that? Is that a reason why?
Well, although we have the written word and the broadcast side of things, I want to ask you, Andrew, about, you're the photographer for the Rebel Yell, and you're probably skating about the campus, taking pictures of all the events that were happening here. Do you feel that as a photographer there was more events aroused by Trump supporters or Hillary Clinton supporters? Do you notice any sort of varying differences between the two when it comes to what sort of severity of that situation you see that makes it good for a photographer to take a picture of?
Right, yeah, on last Wednesday, there was definitely more Trump supporters out there being louder, just, like bigger signs. But then, on the other hand, there were the Hillary protesters that did come in over by the CNN area. And, but even then, like, the Trump people had their megaphones, so it's just visibility, like
Sure.
Trump, even his supporters are more visible. And yeah, so it just makes it easier to grab a picture when something's just like shouting at you, basically.
I get that. But one question I want to ask you about that then is, do you think that there was a difference on that Tuesday and Wednesday following? At the CNN Center, for example, we had lots of students with signs like the Harambe signs. But the day after that, it was completely different when it came to the signs we saw. We had, professionally made signs. We had all that. Is that something you saw as well?
Yeah. There was on the Tuesday, there was definitely more of there was like one guy that had like a pupfish are very interesting, just like not
Yes.
very like relevant signs, but they're just taking it. But yeah, so on Wednesday there was definitely more of a concentration of like the diehard sort of
I just
supporters.
want to say
Go ahead,
something.
Catherine.
Even with positive and negative things about Trump, like he was saying, Trump supporters are louder, but people that were anti-Trump, they're doing the march and they're equally as loud.
Sure.
So it's just anything involved with Trump is loud, in my opinion, whether they're supporters or anti-Trump,
Including himself.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
including Trump himself.
And if I can editorialize, I want to say that UNLV did come around to showing that we were, all together. One thing I did see was that certain people were saying, Clinton's a rapist, or which one was it? It was something along the lines of throw her in jail, and we ended up supplementing that with Reno sucks, sucks. So we all know where our allegiances lie. But let's move on to what one of the candidates has been saying about media coverage. Now, let's be honest with ourselves. The validity of claims aside, there has been one presidential candidate who has made it a part of their platform to accuse media of bias. Of course, we mean Trump. Let's watch a portion of what he had to say at a rally in Arizona.
But it's so much inaccurate information. And by the way, I think their ratings are going to go down really sharply now. They've been asking me to go on for months. I won't do their shows. And the reason I won't is because it's so dishonest that until they straighten up, I'm not doing their shows. And when people finally realize that I'm not doing their shows, they stop watching. That's what happens. And I must say, I don't say this for a reason, and they're tough. They're very tough on me. But Fox has at least been fair. They've been fair. Fox has been fair.
Again, validity of the claim aside, there is only one candidate making this claim and has made it a centralized portion of their platform. How is this attack affecting media, and how does it make you feel as journalists? Catherine, I want to ask you this. You're entering the industry, as we all are.
Right.
Do you feel like this sort of rhetoric is making it a much more volatile industry for you to enter? Or do you feel like it's still status quo?
I'm not really sure with all of this. Like, if, as you asked me before, if I had to be a journalist with Trump being president, I feel like I would have so many more stories and so much more viewers and things like that. As if Hillary's president, do people want to really dig into her things,
Right.
Whereas everyone is digging into Trump's things. So.
Sure.
I feel like
Go ahead, Karina.
I feel like social media has made it even more prevalent. Like so if you go on Twitter, like there's news everywhere. Like it's a much easier way to make. Like that's why he's getting so much coverage, because it's all over social media, so people see it more often instead of like most people. Like for instance, I'm really busy, so I get my news from Twitter because that's just I'm gonna break out work. I just go on Twitter. Like, I'm not going to sit and watch the news when I'm not at home and stuff like that. Yeah.
Well, if I can ask you that about Karina, something that we've seen on the opposite side of that is these Facebook feeds or Twitter feeds are made up by what people are following. The advertisements are, of course, engaged to what sorts of websites they've gone to or shopped at, for that matter. And one such alum from our school, Tommy Lauren, has made it big on Facebook of being more of an alt-right conservative sort of a spokesperson for Trump and making sure that the conservative mindset is protected. Do you feel like it again falls into the audience's realm and responsibility to decide whether they're going to be listening to either side of the conversation or just one?
I feel like most people just listen to one side. Like, most people have like their one news network that they go to. Like, they're not going to go and listen to like Fox and CNN and ABC and all that stuff. Like, they're going to stick to one. If you're going to stick to Fox, you're going to stick to Fox. You're going to stick to CNN, you're going to stick to CNN. So it's like they pick and choose, and it's just like the truth of the matter is media should be nonpartisan, but it's not. Like, there's certain networks that do focus on certain candidates more, and they skew what the story is. Like, that's how it is. And that's just, it has such a huge effect on the audience and how they perceive the information.
So then, Blaze, I want to ask you, as managing editor, do you feel like you too have fallen into this category of making sure that you're falling into what the audience wants? Or have you been able to maintain some sort of civility when it comes to managing stories out of the line-off of what journalists think is most important?
I mean, we've tried to handle both, give the audience both what they want and what they need. That has proven to be difficult, as it has been with every other media organization.
Sure.
People tend to consume what's inside their bubble. They like to listen to what they want to hear. For example, Fox is usually viewed as being a conservative news station. Therefore, Trump likes Fox. I'm sure Hillary Clinton would be more partial to MSNBC.
Right.
So, and going along with that, print's a different medium than broadcast. So we try to fall in between the lines and strike a fair balance.
So then, Andrew, I want to ask you then, do you feel like that falls into your realm as well, taking pictures for what areas you find that are best fit for the consumer? Or do you have some sort of creative expression for your own sake that you like to protect?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Blaze. Like, as a photographer for news, you have to really just like capture what you see. And, you know, it's like, you know, there could be like a certain spin on a story or whatever, but I'm always just going to capture exactly what's there, and you know, I'm not going to make one side look bigger or not.
Try to capture the moment.
Right.
Well, like capturing the moment, let's try to capture what's going on with the paper right now. The state of the paper. That was the headline of the first issue of the Rebel Yell and the first opinion article on that page. The story went on to explain that the paper only has enough funds to keep afloat for a semester and change. We are now 7 issues into the semester, and the end of the year is fast approaching. As students and the American public, too, become more media savvy in this political season, how has the paper been faring, and will we see it next semester? Blaze, I want to ask you this question. How is the paper doing, and do you think that we'll see an issue in the first semester of spring next year?
I do believe there will be a first issue in spring because I'm eternally hopeful. But I like to take the story back to the very beginning.
Sure.
I think it's a good place to start.
Okay.
The Rebel Yell was created before UNLV was even a thing. When we were in Nevada Southern, they existed as a 1-page or 2-page newsletter, and it was titled The Rebel Yell. It had the wolf on it, Confederate flag. It was just following along with the other Civil War images that are populating the campus because of the whole North-South thing.
Right.
So it's been around as long as this university has. For the entire time, we were funded by the student government, now called CSUN. And in around the year 2012, we chose to break away from them. It was a mutual agreement between the Rebel Yell Advisory Board, our editorial board, and their executive board, because their then student body president tried to pick our editor-in-chief, and that would be a conflict of interest because they would try to instate someone that would maybe take a later side to what they'd be doing, and you can't have that word check on the government, just as other media is a check on the national government.
Sure. But so let me ask you about that then, if I may be able to interrupt.
Yeah.
So the paper then has existed for quite some time. That's obviously something that it holds as a great variable as being a great paper. But my question is people are becoming a little bit more savvy to online, more televised, sometimes even radio forms of consumption of media. Do you think the Rebel Yell will be able to hold out in this new world? When it comes to people not reading the paper as much, do you feel like the Rebel Yell will be able to survive in this new realm, this new platform?
I'm glad you asked that. I like any challenge that comes up. It's a brave new world for us. Like other print organizations, we stumbled in the dark trying to find the light. And we're still building our media, our multimedia side. Our website's doing fairly well, considering we're a pretty small publication. We're trying to expand into multimedia, other long-form stories featuring student works of fiction. We want to start getting some.
Well, so let me ask you again.
Yes.
So if I can bring this question back to the university, there have been issues that we've had at the university, and the Rebel Yell has covered them. But again, we are seeing this problem financially speaking, and of course it isn't out of nowhere. Do you feel like this reason that we're having financial differences is a part of how many times the Rebel Yell is picked up and what stories are processed? Where's the financial issues coming from, do you think?
It started when we broke away from the student government. The staff had to be downsized dramatically, and we have basically been applying for funding from the Student Life Funding Committee every year, but since last year, they received more applicants, and there's only so much money to go around.
Sure.
Yeah, so
Would you guys consider being an online or only like news source?
we've considered that. However, a lot of our revenue comes from advertising, and the most expensive form of advertising can come in print. So, although it's been an option, we have tried to stall it as long as possible. Most papers that have gone online only have disappeared.
So you don't feel like that route is better for the Rebel Yell? You feel like being a physical copy is the best way to survive?
Yes, at this time.
Now, one question I know that we've had is the paper itself, the title. One last question about the paper. One of the bigger questions that we've had on campus was our mascot, Hey Reb. With the mascot coming under inspection and the committee the school put in charge to assign a new name put in place, I have to ask about the paper and the future it faces name-wise. Do we feel like this name change for the school, Hey Reb, will affect the Rebel Yell? Have you had any communications with them, and do you feel like the paper will have to change as the mascot changes?
So in 2015, the university commissioned, I can't remember the professor's name right now, he was the chief diversity officer at UNLV. He wrote a 60-page report detailing like if our rebel name was racist, the school's name, if Hey Reb was racist, or if it had any ties to Confederacy. He concluded that Hey Reb does not. However, the Rebel Yell was the only thing remaining on UNLV's campus that had any ties to the Confederacy. Indeed, it does. The Rebel Yell was the Confederates' war cry throughout the Civil War. That was part of the reason why we wanted to change it. However, the discussion has been going on for quite some time on renaming the paper.
So why hasn't the name been changed yet?
Throughout its history, it's been changed several times. None of them have been effective because it was just a random decision by the then editors of the Rebel Yell. This time we wanted to get students engaged with it and choose something and get away from both the Rebel and the Yell. Separated, there's nothing wrong with them, but if you put it together, it's a Confederate war cry.
Right.
And if you use anything with the Rebel name other than the Rebel Yell, it would just feel diluted. It's not the same thing. The Rebel Yell is a very strong name.
Yeah.
Right.
So our last two name options that were voted on by students is the Rebel Review and the Scarlet and Gray Free Press.
So something I want to ask you, Catherine, is as a reporter for Studio G, do you feel like Studio G has to fight for its own place with students' consumption of the media, rather, I apologize. Do you feel like the Studio G has to do the same sort of fight for students' interest?
You know, honestly, for me anyways, or all these millennials nowadays, I feel like they much rather sit in front of a TV and watch, or click a YouTube, Studio G, go on YouTube, watch the news, rather than pick up and that's just my honest opinion, then pick up and read something. A lot of high schools nowadays are saying like, oh, I'd rather like watch the movie than read the book. And I'm just afraid that that's the same thing happening in this industry now.
So then, Karina, let me ask you, as we're talking about Trump and Hillary and talking about how they consume, how audiences consume media on them, do you feel like publications or certain outlets like Studio G, like KUNV, like Rebel Report have to meet the standards of students, or do you feel like they have to meet the standards of the media out there to follow up with what the general audience wants and not what the university audience wants?
It should be like more geared towards the students. Like the students are the ones that are putting it out, so why are they going to like conform to whatever the media is telling them to do. It's not. It's supposed to be like, yeah, we are preparing ourselves to get into the real world where it is like that, but for now we should be able to express ourselves how we want to, express it freely. Like the Rebel Yell being its own separate from the university is a good thing because it's able to cover stuff at the school without having the school influence it as much.
So then, Andrew, I want to ask you, you of course are the person on the ground taking these pictures and going out there and interviewing students. Do you feel like this sort of approach to the Rebel Yell has been the same as it has been since 2012? Of course, we had the financial issues with the Rebel Yell. Do you feel like students are as engaged back then, since you started, as they are now?
Honestly, like so I started at UNLV around 2012, and I honestly didn't really know much about the paper at all until maybe just like a year ago or so. So I think it's definitely picked up since then, and students are more engaged. Yeah.
So a question I have for you then is do you think that your job has become more difficult in the increasing years as they've been going on, or more easy when it comes to the stories that have been coming out? Of course, we had the election or the debate on campus. Do you feel like your job's been getting harder or easier in that aspect?
Well, okay. So honestly, I've just I got hired at the beginning of this month.
Okay.
So, but yeah, it's definitely picked up since then. So.
Well, good. Well, so then one more question I have for Blaze then is, what would you say is your best article in the Rebel Yell, and what would you say is the worst article in the Rebel Yell?
And since I've been writing, or
Sure, either way. Let's go ahead and bash people that are off camera, right? Yeah, we'll get the opportunity. What would you say?
it's a hard one. We've had a lot of good ones. We've had a lot of bad ones.
Well,
I can't
just give me the best thing. Give me the best.
The best? Well, I'll tell you one I personally like. It's one I wrote. It was Fear and Loathing at UNLV's presidential debate from this past issue. 5,000 word giant.
And how about that? How about we have it right here, Fear and Loathing, right here for you. Well, that's our time. I want to thank thank our panelists and you for watching our show, and let you know, well, all the other shows, just like The Ramble, will be right here for you on The Scramble. Thank you, and see you again.